Between Florida State and Miami, which one next reaches college football championship level?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I want to talk some Canes and Noles today, kind of an overview. Both programs are getting their start to spring practice, and it's about evaluations of their roster, how they got to where they are. Did you hire the right coaches? Well, all of those things lead to rivalries and championships. Both programs have had their moments here recently, and they've also had some really big duds. Florida State last year fell off, but the year before they were 13-0 before losing to Georgia. This past season, it looked like Miami was headed to the playoff, and then they, quite frankly, didn't get it done against Georgia Tech and again against Syracuse. So these teams have kind of climbed close, but didn't make it. So which one is more likely to reach the pinnacle of college football? And for me, in this new playoff format, you're a championship level team by my barometer. You can use your own if you make the Final Four. If you're in the Final Four, you're a championship level team, and you're probably a field goal away one way or the other in a game to make it. Look at the last year's games. Penn State only lost by 3 to Notre Dame. And then you look at the Ohio State game. They had a really close contest against Texas. So it could have been two different teams even in the title. So if you make the Final Four, you're probably a championship level football team. Which one's more likely? To help understand that, I want to talk about the coaching staffs. So backdrop, especially with what went on at Miami with their coaching changes on the defensive staff, that was wild. I did not see that one coming. I missed it by a mile. But after what I learned, I'm not surprised. And then also talk about how the acquisition of talent has taken place. Both programs missed colossally, not a little bit, colossally last year at specific critical positions. And they failed because of that. Miami was still obviously much more successful than Florida State, but if they would have hit just one more spot right and they missed on a couple, they would have been a team in the playoff. What do these programs got to do? Because I grew up on watching Florida State play Miami, and I was used to, just to add a further point, seeing elite players, legendary players. Ray Lewis was going at Miami. You had work done and all these guys at Florida State. There was always somebody that was in National Player of the Year race, All-American status, Heisman race, all of that stuff at both these schools. Why has it dropped off and who's next? So I've got 10 questions with that, and it starts with a very easy one. Who has the better roster right now, and why is it where it is? Well, it's pretty easy. It's Miami. Miami has done a better job recruiting high school. I know Bud Elliott, many other people that cover Florida State, and myself included, have talked about extensively that Florida State did not do a good job with recruiting the high school ranks over the last 5 years to their standard. They still hired some good coaches that brought in some good players, but they didn't recruit at an elite level, and really not at all. Not one time has Norvell had a top 10 class. On the other side, you look at Cristobal, that's something they're able to do. They've done it more consistently. They're up. They're not championship level. Miami doesn't have a championship level team this next year either, in my opinion, but they're still pretty darn good. It's because of consistency. Once you get your roster set and you run the same systems over and over again, they got the same OC again, that also helps. If you do that, then guess what? You're more likely to plug and play at each position across the board. Now, I'm going to get into the coaching here in a second, especially with Miami. There's some concerns that I have, but Florida State cleaned house. Both coordinators change. Obviously, Miles On comes up, and the rosters have changed a little bit based on that because, like, just for Florida State's sake, they get Thomas Castellanos come down from BC to be the quarterback. He fits Gus's offense, and you completely changed your offense from what you had last year. You had a total statue in the backfield. Now you've got a guy that can run all over the place and can play tailback somewhere or receiver or DB. He's a freak. So both have changed. But Miami's ahead because they've just done a better job with their organization and their effort in recruiting. When I was growing up, both of them would have top 10 classes every year and usually top 5. There are a few exceptions if they took a few guys less in a class because they were close to the 85 max or whatever. But outside of that, these were pretty much two teams that were going to be pushing for top 5 status. Name the last time that both Florida State and Miami had a top 5 class. I honestly can't do it. I'm not sure when that would be. That's kind of crazy considering how much talent is in the Sunshine State. It's had more NFL draft picks than any other state over the last few years. I don't know why it's that way. And that's something that I'll get into in another podcast. I might just dive into that one question, but that's something to think about. Number 2, if you look at this in like the roster holes that are like with Florida State, obviously O-line in particular, that's been talked about ad nauseum here at Locked On Seminoles, has been a disaster with recruiting. But it's because of my second question. Why have the coaches failed at recruiting and then sometimes development? It still comes down to the head coaches. And it's why Norvell, after he signed that contract after the great season in 23, and he deserves credit for it, was really taken off the hook because his contract was too big to fire him. That's reality. Anybody that thinks otherwise is crazy. It was $50+ million to tell him to pack up and leave. It was cheaper to do the coordinator thing. It's just true. Miami, on the other side, it was third year for Cristobal, and they were pretty darn good. They choked in the Georgia Tech game. That shouldn't have happened 2 years in a row, by the way. And then they're up 21 points against Syracuse. That's a good team. You cannot lose games when you're up 21-0. Period. Mario did. So his staff ends up getting some change, and this is the backdrop. I was told by somebody close enough to the program, defensive staff didn't hold guys accountable as much, and that's why they fell off as much as they did. Too many players took time off during the week, etc., in some way, shape, or form, didn't lock in as much. Staff changes, linebacker, coordinator, etc. It was massive on how many guys that they changed. Secondaries changed as well. Like, they have massive change. We'll see if it works this year for them. And then you look at Florida State, as I mentioned, Malzahn. You've got Coach White coming from Nebraska. He brings pot roast. He brings Cooper. This is a big change as well. You got Herb Hand on the offensive line. We don't know which ones of these guys will get it done yet as developers. That starts right now with spring ball. But with recruiting, I have good news for both Florida State and Miami fans. I have seen no reason to believe, and recruiting obviously is my bag. I do the Locked On the Portal show covering recruiting every single day. If you do not recruit well, Mario definitely isn't going to keep you around. He's more serious about recruiting than Norvell. But Norvell is upped it too, himself included, but the staff. So the roster and the coaching moves, I think, kind of goes together because talent acquisition for both schools is headed up. Again, right now, I trust Mario to do better with that because he's got more of a track record. But there's been a newfound energy with Norvell that I did not expect at all. They've lined up a ton of visits. I think it'll still be a slow play for kids to commit because everybody wants to see how Florida State plays during the season. That's unfortunate for Florida State, but I don't expect a ton of commitments this summer, at least ones that are ironclad, because people know he's on the hot seat. We'll see. I think Mario's got a lot more leeway there, so we'll see how that goes. But he still has a lot to prove because if they have a bad year in year 4, then he's in a bad spot, kind of like Norvell was at the end of this year. But he got the new lease on life, both coordinators and several coaches changing over. So I think he's here through 26, conservatively, probably 27. So we'll see how that goes. Next question, number 3, just recruiting overall. Is there any reason to believe that Florida State or Miami is going to pull away from the other one? And I would say no right now. If you'd have asked me 6 months ago, I'd have said, that's easy. It's Miami. But Florida State has changed. It's enough where I'm comfortable to say that Florida State is at least closing the gap a little bit based on official visits and hitting Florida hard, South Florida included. They've got multiple guys committed in South Florida. They got offers from Miami and other prominent programs. That's a good sign. But again, I do not bet against Mario Cristobal overall and his staff. They've earned this when it comes to recruiting. They just do a good job. They really try to build relationships. And I know NIL is important. People point to relationships are number one, even in the NIL era. Relationships are number one. There is no substitute for time and effort in recruiting. Your own family takes a back seat. That's the way it is. Or you're unemployed. Take your pick. Number 4, the portal. This is where I think both programs bombed last year. They both sucked. Miami missed across the board when it came to key guys like secondary and whatnot. Didn't get it done. They thought they were going to be really good. Didn't get it done. They ended up starting a freshman at corner. Come on, man. O.J. Frederick is a really good guy. Like him a lot, and he can play. But a freshman corner should not be starting at Miami or Florida State or Florida either. That's why they ended up in the spot they were in, up 21-0 against Syracuse and still getting bombed until the end of the game, and Syracuse found a way to win that game. They missed in the portal. And, of course, Florida State was even worse. Like, they barely hit on any of the guys they thought they were going to hit on. That was one of the worst portal classes since they brought the portal about. It's amazing that two coaching staffs with that much experience and that much recruiting ability in terms of guys that have been on the road forever and understanding who can fit where miss so poorly. I don't know how you evaluate that, because I'm taking both of them and throwing them out the window. There's just no way they're both going to miss that bad again, right? Surely it can't happen. So right now, just through the early part of it, if you had to ask me, and I got a couple of key things that give me concern about Miami I want to get to in a second, but right now it looks like this is easy. Miami's the team that's most likely to end up at a championship level sooner. Not so fast. When we come back, we're going to continue this discussion here on Locked On Seminoles. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track of your cash. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you actually start building some wealth. When you look at Monarch Money and you're going to utilize it, you will realize just how much it's going to help you save money on spending, because whether it's food delivery or anything else, you're going to be able to budget what you do. Also, it's easy to get with your partner and figure out how you want to spend your money, because you can collaborate on one app between yourself and your partner, set goals, and make it a lot less stress-free. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off on your first year. This show is also brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. So you shouldn't be worried about it, and either should you be worried about getting tickets. That shouldn't be stressful at all, and that's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute ticket deals at unbeatable prices. Gametime Picks is a great example. Curation made easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, a play, anything else you could imagine. Gametime Picks is there to help you do it. Also, it's peace of mind. The seat view, you can click right on your phone from your seat and see what the venue looks like, whether it's to the pitcher's mound, to the stage, whatever it might be. That's an easy way to do it with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The biggest concern I have with Miami moving forward is really about this season. They brought in, as I just talked about the portal, that was not coincidental, Carson Beck for this next year. That's either going to be boom or that's going to be bust. I don't know how he's going to react after the really awkward, and I hope he's healthy for this season, that awkward hit that he took in the playoffs. He's out. He ends up going in, getting surgery. We're going to see how he does. He's in spring ball and all that, but is he going to be ready mentally and physically to take on their first game's Notre Dame, by the way? Good luck. That's a pretty serious defense. Is he going to be ready for that? Is he going to have the right chemistry? They certainly hit the home run. That's the one thing they did last year. Cam Ward, that guy was awesome, but he couldn't play enough on the other side of the ball for him, as in not at all. I mean, he's just the quarterback. You can only score so much. And I don't think Carson Beck is even in the stratosphere, not in the stratosphere of Cam Ward. I don't. So unless Miami's defense hits this year, and I'm not confident, they got problems in the secondary until otherwise proven, and they also have problems, no doubt about it, at linebacker, because they couldn't fit a run gap last year in critical moments to save their life. When is that going to get fixed? So you got to prove it to me. And again, this is year 4 for them. They haven't had a complete rebirth, but you did change over your defense coordinator. If you miss there, Miami's in a funky situation because Mario loves the school, great recruiter, seems like a good guy, all those things. But after year 4, if they go 8-4, 9-3 this year, that's a problem because he's not quite good enough to get you over the hump is going to be the perception. Now, they could be 11-1, and I think they should make the playoff. If Miami doesn't make the playoff this upcoming season, something's wrong. I don't think they'll make the Final Four because, again, I don't trust Carson Beck. But I think there's enough concern with other areas, too. It's not going to just be Carson one way or the other. He'll have some good games that he can certainly spin it, but he's too inconsistent for me. He had 3 different games last year with 3 picks. That's a problem. That cannot happen, especially in an offense like Georgia that actually has playmakers around you at running back, tight end, or receiver. They just didn't make enough things happen. And I know their receivers dropped the ball some and whatnot, but he was throwing it directly to the other team sometimes. He got worse. So if they fail on offense, and that's what they were known for last year, are you really going to depend on that defense to get you over the top in year 4? I'm not so sure. Florida State on the other side, they just need to get to a bowl. This year is kind of a pass for Norvell. Now, if they bomb and they go 4-8, he's gone. They're going to have to find a way to eat $50 million. That's my guess. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they'll make a bowl game, and then in 26, it'll be that question again. Okay, are they trending in the right direction? This year is kind of an in-between. We shall see. But the schedule for Florida State, not super hard, but the back end isn't the easiest. And there's so much newness. He's going to get a little bit of a free pass is my guess. Maybe I'm wrong, but again, I just don't see Florida State eating $50 million or anything even close to it. I mean, not even in the stratosphere because of all the things they got going on. Construction at the stadium, all the stuff they're worried about in regards to getting the payout to get in like 5 years to get out of the ACC. They're not looking to spend on contracts. They're not. I think Florida State, as weird as it is almost to the point where they're more stable than Miami if the Canes, big if, do not meet expectations this year. I got them winning 10 games, minimum. But if they don't, then they're going to be in that middle ground that nobody wants to be in. And it'll be harder to recruit, harder to keep coaches, and the program's going to come a little bit more stagnant. Next thing, this is kind of crazy, but the one thing that Florida State would lose if they were to, let's say, go to the Big Ten right now, it's harder to make the playoff if you go to the Big Ten in terms of just the schedule. Now, I'm not saying it's harder because you're going to get a lot more money, and they would, but I'm just talking about like first year. Can one of these two teams have a run in the next couple of years because their schedule fits? Well, it should have been last year for Miami, first off. But yeah, I want to just bring up something. In 2026, not this year, but next year, if somebody catches fire, and it doesn't have to be Florida State or Miami, just consider the following. Clemson is going to lose Cade Klubnik. Who else in the league besides Florida State, Miami, and Clemson remotely recruit at a college football level year in and year out? SMU's kind of close, but not really. Anybody else? Carolina might in a few years, but do you really think Belichick's going to be there? No. There is a chance in 2026 either FSU or Miami could run the table because Clemson's going to fall back. You're not going to replace a 3.5-year starter easily at quarterback. And it could be a scenario with the rosters getting better at both those schools. Maybe Florida State or Miami makes a run. Again, I would still pick Miami in that scenario, but they're going to be changing quarterbacks again. It's hard to say. 26 could be a wild year in the ACC, even wilder than what I expect this year. So keep that in mind. If one of the two schools is to make a run, it's 26 in my opinion, because Florida State and Clemson, Florida State and Miami, while they've got good rosters, it's also about who you play. The schedule matters. Clemson probably isn't going to be great. I don't trust SMU year in, year out, especially now that they've made the playoff. It's different when you're the hunter as compared to being the hunted. 26 is a year one of them could make it and make a run. We'll see. Next, and this is just something that drives me nuts about why both programs, Florida State and Miami, have struggled. And this just didn't happen very often when I was a kid into my 20s and 30s. When they had a team come up on the schedule, home, neutral, away, bowl, did not matter. If that team did not have at least similar, didn't have to have equal, but similar talent, Florida State or Miami didn't beat them. They humiliated them. Far too often between Florida State and Miami in the last few years take the 23 season away from Florida State, obviously a really good football team. Miami for most of last season, but they still fell off. And by the way, Miami still hasn't won an ACC title. That's ridiculous. It's pathetic that a school with that much history hasn't won an ACC title, but it is what it is. How in the world are you looking at a program like Florida State or Miami that consistently just lay an egg? It's just mental focus. This happened under Jimbo and every coach since at Florida State. And Miami, it's just been since the 2003 season, really 2004 on for Miami, they can't get out of their own way. I don't have an answer for this, but the first one that doesn't just stub their own toe, like last year, again, Miami stubbed their toe against Georgia Tech. How? You're way better than Georgia Tech. It's ridiculous. And then, of course, Florida State, they couldn't do anything last year on offense. That was disgraceful. It's really, really bizarre. This one for both teams is just a loss. I don't understand it. And far as each of them making a championship, it's why I'm concerned. It's not fun for me to cover the rivalry unless they're both up, and it just seems like neither one is up at the same time anymore. That's wild to me. It is what it is. But when we come back, there's something that I think can change that. Cam Ward helped a little bit last year for Miami, having that elite player. We're going to talk about the next chance for an elite player at Florida State and maybe one at Miami too. That's next here on Locked On Seminoles. Daylight savings has snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to get through. Whether you're staying up to watch the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up that you need. Basketball is a great way to look at it. I stay up late watching the basketball games, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. 5 Hour Energy can help you make it through that next day. Also, if you're on the go as much as I am, whether it's going to a game, whether it's going to the grocery store, finish your day at work, 5 Hour Energy's got your back there too. Head over to 5hourenergy.com. Find all 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. And you can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your front door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay organized with 5 Hour Energy. Is Deuce Robinson Florida State's next superstar? He certainly fits the mold of what Mike Norvell has had in the past. Is that the guy that you need to win a championship? Well, it'd be nice if he was surrounded with some other guys, but you can certainly build on it. I've met him. I've been around him. I've seen how he works. He's had a couple of good years at USC, but they had so many receivers, they spread it around. He's got a chance to be a dominant player at Florida State because he's going to be the go-to receiver. 6'6", 220, he can go get it. And you got Thomas Castellanos throwing the ball and some pretty good running backs in a completely revamped offensive line. This helps. I'm not saying Florida State's winning a championship this year because that's ridiculous. They're not. But you need to have that player that gets you back on the map, somebody to look at your program, to boost recruiting, to boost morale, and quite frankly, just make Florida State offense look like the Florida State offense of old. Down the field shots, big plays running through the secondary. They need somebody. I really think that Deuce is the guy. Maybe I'm wrong, but if Florida State doesn't get him the ball for 800-plus yards this year, it would be disappointing. I think he's got a chance to even make it to 1,000, depending on who they want to throw the ball to and how they want to feature him. They need this kind of player. For Miami, there are multiple guys that it could be, but it's time for Ruben Bain to be that player too. Ruben was banged up some last year, and that's part of the deal. He's incredibly strong, really nice guy off the field, but in pads, he's incredibly strong. He can bull rush you, he can speed rush you, and he's full of hustle. Miami has a famous history with their defensive lineman, and I think he's their next star. That defense needs him to play big and be healthy to overcome what was quite honestly a disaster last year. Run gap fits, secondary misses, etc. But it starts up front for Florida State and Miami. If you don't win in the trenches, you're not going to be a championship level team. Miami needs to recruit better in the trenches, whether it's through the portal or the high school ranks, and they're starting to trend that way. And Bain was one of the first pieces to it. I think those are the two players that can kind of help both Florida State and Miami get back to a championship level, and we'll see what happens because I think both, they're going to be juniors, each of them could be headed to the NFL draft after this year, and that'll propel each program. Again, 26 is the year to look at, not 25 in my opinion, for both the Noles and the Canes. Finally, how can Florida State and Miami, take your pick on which one you want to go with, take that next step in terms of not just recruiting, not just the way they coach and develop, but from a mentality standpoint? As I mentioned earlier, this was not coincidental. Florida State and Miami, when they played somebody 30 years ago, and they were going against a team that was no doubt, they had more talent, they didn't beat them. They humiliated them. They wanted to destroy them by the end of the first quarter. I don't see enough of that. So this isn't about roster management. This isn't about coaching. This is about players that want to kick the teeth in of the other team. This is 100% player driven. There aren't enough people wearing the helmets for Florida State and Miami, in my opinion, over the last 5 years in particular, except for, again, like the 23 season for Florida State and the 24 season for Miami, take those out. But there were too many times guys weren't bought in all the way through for every game. Not some of them, not just the rivalry game, not the cool night game, all 12 games. That's not what you used to see from these programs. And again, that's why I grew up with it. I want to see that again from both Florida State and Miami because that makes the sport better. Those teams set the trend in the 80s and 90s on how to play. It needs to be that way again. I don't know which one it's going to be between Florida State and Miami that really makes it to a championship level again. They both have holes with coaching, how they built their roster with the portal. Miami's done better with high school recruiting, so I guess it's easier to pick them. But if they fall off even a little bit this year, they could be in a really bad spot. So I would slightly lead Miami's direction, but I don't think they're a championship level team this year. And I think Florida State will be back up in 26. So this is really close. It's going to come down to a few decisions by coaches and then the players. This is where the coaches are out of the equation. Who has the grit and the mindset to be dominant again? Right now, I don't think Florida State or Miami deserves to be in that conversation to be a dominant program, not even remotely, whether it's in recruiting or anything else. They're good in different areas, and they've got good coaches coming in. Obviously, Florida State just did wholesale changes, but there's no reason to think this year is going to be great for either one of them, and that's a shame. I want to see it happen because this is one of the best rivalries in all of American sports, and the sooner that both, not just one, is at a championship level, the better it will be for fans, for the Canes and for the Noles. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in and learning everything you can about what's going on with Florida State. I appreciate it. Please hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe. We will see you again soon here on Locked On Seminoles.